Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. My guest today is Nancy Croisier. Nancy is a wine writer and marketer, turning consumers onto Washington and Oregon wines. So, Nancy, first, come on, Oregon. This is all about Washington. Anyway, I kid. So, Nancy, welcome.
Thank you.
When we talked earlier, you had alluded to the fact that your career prior to doing this was in HR. I can think of lots of reasons why somebody would want to get out of the HR business because I think, anyway, no. But in all seriousness, you had a corporate career in HR, and now you're helping wineries promote themselves across the Northwest, let's say. What was the motivation to take the jump?
Well, I had a really bad year. My dad had passed away from a fatal disease. And the company I worked for, where I was doing HR at the time, was doing massive layoffs. You might remember like around 2007, 2008.
Yes, I do.
And so my weekends were spent emptying out my childhood home, and the weekdays were spent letting people go who I developed working relationships with and genuinely liked.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in all of that, I needed to somehow find joy again. And I kept seeing all these ads for the Northwest Wine Academy, which is a wine program down in South Seattle College. And, seeing it time and time again, I thought, I think I need to check this out. So I gave them a call and discovered that Chef Lenny, who was one of my favorite restaurateurs, he used to have a fantastic restaurant up on Queen Anne Hill called Sapphire. He was one of the instructors, and he would actually prepare food for these wine and food pairing classes. So I was like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And I was invited to sit in on a class one night. And from that point on, I decided, okay, there's a way I had to figure out how to make this work, and left corporate world behind. And here we are.
So when you say you left corporate world, did you rip the Band-Aid off, or was this a side hustle to start with? That's such a popular phrase these days, side hustle. But did you make the clean break, or did you try to do it in tandem for a little while?
Well, I had actually asked my manager at the time if I could work part-time, because I thought, okay, this will maybe help me get some energy back. Because,
Mm-hmm.
at the time I was like, just never feeling like sleep restored me, nothing recharged my batteries. I just felt totally drained. And since we had done that for so many employees, because we were a pretty awesome HR team in my view.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, maybe I can make that work. And he just said, no. He's like, someday I want you to be here and you won't, and I'll just be ticked off.
All right.
Okay. Well, there's my sign. I think I need to just part ways.
So you made the clean break. Okay. All right. Why wine? Were you a wine enthusiast prior to the courses? See, like my thing is, I would have, like, if there was a coffee course, I'd be taking it type thing. That's my thing. So why wine, and how did you first get interested in wine?
Well, my husband and I had made some trips to, I think one of our first trips was down to Napa, because, that's where everybody kind of starts their wine journey, I think. And then we started doing some trips locally, like we did Walla Walla.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, wine and food always kind of called to me.
Okay.
I love dinner parties, sitting around the table with friends for hours on end. And, and then, as I mentioned, when I heard one of my favorite chefs was
Mm-hmm.
teaching one of the classes, it just kind of made me think, okay,
Okay.
let's check it out a little more. But even when I was in HR, I wasn't your typical HR person. I would do open enrollment meetings, those long, boring insurance meetings. Ugh. So I would do open enrollment with some high-end wine. I'd pour like some Leonetti, which is kind of a cult wine around Washington, and bring in appetizers from one of the top local restaurants. So I was the only manager who had 100% attendance at all my events.
I might have liked corporate life better if I had worked there. I'm just putting that out there. Okay. All right. All right. So
Yeah,
so your wine journey started with the trip to Napa. So I am a big believer that Walla Walla is for wine and Napa is for auto parts. I
that's
love
what many say.
I love
That's
that
what many
t-shirt.
say.
I love that t-shirt. I just think it's funny. No, Napa's got, I mean, let's be honest, Napa's got some amazing, there's so much going on there. One of my good friends is really into wine and travels to Napa 2 or 3 times a year from where he lives at. And yeah, it just
But here's the thing with Washington wine, you get great quality,
yeah,
but you don't have to pay nearly as much as you do for wine from Napa.
right. So you started this course.
Mhm.
Now, were you still working when you took the course, or you were gainfully unemployed when you started the course?
Correct.
Okay. So you started the course, and what was the course supposed to prepare you for?
So there are a few different tracks available at the school, and I was interested in wine and food pairing.
Okay.
So that's what started there. And then ultimately, I ended up also leaning into wine marketing.
Okay.
So I've got certificates in both of those things.
All right. And obviously you did a good job when you were doing the HR meetings and you figured that out. Okay. So how long was the course?
Oh my gosh. So that one course,
Oh,
that was 1 quarter, and then I bumped up the number of classes I was taking after that.
okay.
Ultimately, I ended up being in school about 4 years because not every class I wanted to take was available every quarter.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I did that, and then I started working in a little local shop. It was kind of like a sur la table. It was a kitchen shop,
Mm-hmm.
culinary center where we offered classes. And so we would have these great James Beard award-winning chefs come in and do these extraordinary cooking classes. And I got to pick out all the wine for that. And I was the wine buyer for the shop. So that was kind of the start of my wine career there.
All right. What made you focus on Washington and wines? Why is she's pointing to off the camera? So I'm going to guess the husband. Okay. Why?
Someone
What?
forgot I was doing this today.
Oh, so was it the husband that was the impetus for Washington, Oregon focus, or what was the?
No, once I started taking a deeper dive into the wines here and meeting the winemakers and hearing the stories and meeting people actually in school who were starting to go down their own journeys down
Right.
this path to start to make their own wines and open their own wineries. It just got me really interested in like the smaller local wineries.
Okay.
um, and Oregon, the charm there is that they do a lot of Pinot Noir really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Washington wine, don't get me wrong, but Pinot just really doesn't grow that well here.
Okay. Well, no. Hey, that's look. As much as I kid about Oregon, and there are things that regions can do better than other regions. Let's just be fair about that. So
It is the same like with fruits and veggies, right?
right, exactly. We would not be known for our avocados here in Washington State. Let's just put it that way. So all right. So when we talked on the phone the other day, this is completely Well, it's relevant, but it's completely out of left field. So you had mentioned Central Washington had a wine program, or you thought that they did, and I was like, I'm not sure that they do. I immediately saw something online about Central Washington's wine program, and Central Washington University has a wine program. It's almost like Google was listening. It was creepy, but so when you think about though the educational components of the industry now, I mean WSU's got a really large and well established program. The community college in Tri-Cities has a program. Central Washington University, South Seattle, wine is becoming a very large product offering from the state of Washington.
Mhm.
And it is becoming more universally acknowledged as being good wine.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's great wine.
Right. So full disclosure, I don't have the palate for wine. Okay. And that's fine. I'll have a glass of wine, but it's by no means am I going to be able to debate with you the intricacies of a wine. But what I do find fascinating is how the state has positioned itself and is continuing to position itself as a region of exceptional wines.
Mhm.
And within the state, even there's different divisions of, is it AVA? Is that the right word?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
those are the
The
regions.
region,
Yeah.
right. And so, those are becoming more, if I'm aware of it, it has to be very aware. I mean, it's like, I'm not studying this topic. So putting you on the spot, completely on the spot here. Where's your favorite region for wine in the state of Washington? I said region, so
That's so tough.
I gave you a big area. I could have said winery, but I gave you a region.
Yeah.
Where do you, for your palate, what do you like?
It kind of, since we're very much wine with food people here in our house,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of depends on, like we always pick a wine based on what we're having for dinner
Okay.
or the season, because what we have for dinner is
Right.
impacted by, the
Absolutely.
weather and that kind of thing. But
Let me
one thing,
say it's summertime. So
uh
your menu is going to be summertime. So what's going on at the house for meals in summer, and then you're going to pair it with wine. What region might that wine be coming from?
it's going to vary greatly, but a lot of it, we do a lot of, when the hubby's doing his big barbecuing
Mm-hmm.
thing, we'll grab for Syrah or something like that. Um, Gosh, every region offers something so great. Like there's Walla Walla has like really, really incredible wines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then one winery in Natchez Heights, Willridge Winery, he's got some really geeky varieties. Like he's got Zweigelt and like you just never see that anywhere else around here. And in the summertime, I love that for a red wine because it's on the lighter side. It's not too heavy. It's a little lower in alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
We drink a lot of bubbles in our household.
Okay.
Uh, every Monday, we call it Mousseux Monday because that's kind of a French term for bubbles. And our philosophy is if you start Monday off with bubbles, it just sets the tone for the whole week.
I think that's a philosophy that more of us should adopt. I like that. Okay. So,
So like we'll do bubbles and popcorn for dinner on Monday because I usually have board meetings. I'm on the board for Seattle Urban Wineries, and those meetings kind of run at an awkward time, and I don't feel like cooking dinner. So popcorn and bubbles is the answer. And bubbles are being produced by a lot of wineries here now, from Walla Walla to Yakima, to Very Cellars in Yakima is one of my absolute favorites. Willard, who I just mentioned, they just bottled a sparkling Nebbiolo. I bought a bottle the other day. I haven't had it yet, but I bet it's delicious.
okay. All right.
Yeah. So
So
there's so many options. It's hard to limit it.
I know, but that's half the fun of this show is I get to ask those questions. They're next to them. They're simple, but they're next to impossible to answer. What I'm not going to ask you who's your favorite winery and all of these things. I'm not going to ask you anything like that, but I am going to ask you who currently, and the next time we talk, this answer could change. It's completely okay. But currently you've mentioned a couple, like you said, Natchez Heights. Who's out there doing interesting things with wine right now that the public might not know about?
Well, it's funny. So Wilrich, who I just mentioned, he actually, Paul Beveridge is the winemaker owner there. He's doing cool things. Like I say, he's got those really out there varieties that we don't see a lot of. And he had the first vineyard in the state to be certified biodynamic and organic. He's also got fruit orchards out there, and he's got a distillery. So like he takes all the after he presses off the grapes for wine, he then makes grappa from all the grape skins. And then he also distills the other fruits he has there into brandies and such.
What do you mean by biodynamic?
Biodynamic is a very interesting approach to farming. Some call it kind of a little woo-woo
Okay.
farming. It relies on uh, very much paying attention to the phases of the moon and things like that. People plant, they take cow horns, put dung in there, cow dung, and then bury that. And there are all these different teas that can be made to spray the vines to prevent pests and disease from spreading among the vines. So it's farming without synthetic herbicides, without synthetic pesticides. But it's really interesting because I've talked to, when I interview people for the Slow Wine Guide, which is one of the books I contribute to, you ask any two people like what it means to them, and everyone has a different answer. Some of them it's about, it's creating wine with soul, or it's, farming with love. Someone actually called it happiness farming. So yeah, it's really interesting.
So all I can take away is the cow horns with dung thing. I'm not sure how that pertains to happiness or soul, but in all seriousness, I mean, I'm sorry, that was a very strange thing. Do you know what's the rational thought here for putting dung in a cow horn and burying it? What is that going to do?
It's good for the earth. So it's, when you
Right.
use like all these synthetic pesticides and
Right.
so forth, it the earth loses a lot of nutrients in that.
Yes.
And so, the cow dung, and it's like a form of fertilizer. Yep. And so it's all about, keeping, all the nutrients going.
But why the horn? I mean, that's the part that's throwing me. Is the horn's not going to break down very quickly, is it? Or
there's actually a time when they dig it back up.
Okay.
And then whatever has happened to that, then they spread the stuff around.
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, no, that's just, I mean, first off, biodynamic was a phrase I'm not familiar with. And then you'd throw in a cow horn with dung in it. I'm like, huh, okay.
I know, and I've got like all the technical language down, don't I?
No, but see, I get the whole premise though of trying to nutrients and protection, if you will, not being a chemical, because the chemicals do leach everything out of the soil. And so there's organic things that we can do to bring back the quality of the soil that we're trying to grow things in, or control the soil, and then to try to manage pests. All that's great. It's just, and I've never heard of it phrased as biodynamic. So that's kind of interesting. And then, like I said, the cow horn and dung. I'm fixated on that. So
Great imagery, right?
yeah, I'm like a 14-year-old. I'm just like fixated on this. It is now it's going to be a joke the rest of the episode. No. So this winery is doing kind of more non-traditional, more cutting edge types of you said the grapes that they're growing are not commonplace for the area, things like that. That's pretty fascinating. And you obviously like the finished product.
Oh, yeah, his wines are great.
Okay.
But it's interesting though, because like biodynamics, I mean, that goes way back.
Okay.
But the majority of farming here in Washington, sadly, is conventional farming.
Right. I'm asking you to be the spokesperson for Washington State in wines right now, which is completely unfair thing, and you didn't know what you're getting into. But approximately, do you know approximately how many acres of grapes are being grown in the state right now?
Oh, the acreage, I don't know off the top of my head. My husband can do that. He's an accountant. He can remember numbers in his head really well.
Gotcha.
I can tell you there are over 1,000 wineries in the state. So there's
over
enough grapes to
1,000 wine.
keep
Okay.
them.
So I heard the stat that there was like 130 in Walla Walla, which seems plausible because when you go into downtown Walla Walla, there's a winery, just like there's a Starbucks in downtown Seattle every 3 feet. There's a winery every 3 feet in downtown Walla Walla. So I have no problem envisioning 100 plus wineries in the Walla Walla. I really don't have a problem envisioning 1,000 wineries, frankly, in the state of Washington. Where are they Are they primarily in Eastern Washington, Central? You know, where? It's like I don't think of wineries. I mean, I know they're everywhere. I mean, there's one in Westport, but primarily are the bulk of them in Eastern Washington?
Exactly. Yeah, they're on the other side of the Cascades.
Right.
Because the climate there is so much more conducive to grape growing.
Right. And
But we do have some wineries here in the Puget Sound AVA, and they're growing some really lovely, cool climate white wines. Sigarebe is a variety that I really fell in love with when I was in wine school. Mueller Turgau, they're very aromatic grapes, very, very pretty. And Betsy Whittick over on in Bainbridge Vintners, she's farming with a horse, um, and she's teaching other people in the region to farm, not just grapes, but agriculture in general. Just doing great things. But yeah, there's not a lot of, if people want to grow red grapes, you kind of need to go to the other side of the mountains where it's
we need
warmer.
that hot weather to bring them. Okay. So 1,000 wineries, give or take, whatever, because that probably has changed by the time we're done with this episode. Two have opened and one is closed. We just don't know. So when I think of wines in Washington State, what I'm aware of is that, like, when I was in college in the early 80s, Chateau Saint Michel became prevalent. It was a name you heard. Okay. And as a non-wine person, that was probably my first awareness of Washington wines. Okay. I know there was other wineries, but I just didn't know about them. So I kind of think of Chateau Saint Michel as kind of the granddaddy of Washington's wine industry.
Sure.
I don't know that that's a fair statement to make for them or not, but they certainly captured the public's attention. Okay.
Yeah, they certainly help put us on the map for sure.
Kind of just like Starbucks kind of put coffee on the map as well. I mean, you wouldn't buy a $5 cup of coffee from a little shack on the side of the road without going to Starbucks, and Starbucks trailblazing that. And I think Chateau Saint Michel was a trailblazer for wine in our state and encouraged people to get out there and start doing their own stuff. So these 1,000 wineries, most of them are probably under 10 years old. Would that be accurate? And just a random sample size? Or
probably.
Okay.
Right now, though, we're also seeing a lot of second generations stepping into the wineries their parents started,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is kind of exciting too.
Okay.
You know, to see those wineries have longevity.
Right. I know here, like so I'm in Wenatchee, and so we have a lot of little wineries around here, and they do they do a pretty good job of bringing people to their tasting rooms by having live music or food trucks show up. I mean, things like that. So since I'm a music nut, we'll go a lot of times. I'll go to these places and go up to Chelan, and there's a lot of wineries up in Chelan.
Oh yeah.
But what I don't understand about the Chelan thing is there's not that many grapes being grown up there, though, are there?
There are some. I actually had the pleasure of going to visit Hard Road Ho last year to interview for the Slow Wine Guide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love what they're doing because in their grape growing, they're very, very cognizant of the fact that anything they put in the vineyard will end up going down into the lake. So, you know, they're again pesticide free, um, and they were like pioneers in that area. They're planting more grapes, but yeah, I think a lot of wineries there also get grapes from other areas and bring them in. But also Cardis Winery, they've got a few grapes actually right in front of their tasting room there, and they're really cool varieties. So they've got Pickardin, which you don't see anywhere else in Washington, and
Never
they're
heard of it.
doing a sparkling claret blanche. And as I said, I love bubbles, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, I have to have that because I haven't seen that anywhere
Okay.
else.
And that wineries is that in Manson?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're right off the road there on the way up as you're going up the lake. Okay.
Yeah, they're actually they just opened a tasting room in Soto Urban Works here in Seattle.
Okay. Going to ask you an impossible question.
Oh no.
I always love. It's not that I'm trying to put guests on the spot and ask like I want you to say this is my favorite, and it's so that somebody goes, but that they don't like this. Like, okay, what is your for you? I kind of asked you this variation earlier, but I'm just going to go specifically. Is there a grape that you gravitate towards?
Oh my gosh. I like the less common things for the most part.
Okay.
So like as I was just talking about, you know, Claret Blanche, I was like, oh my God, I have to have that, you know, because I just don't see that anywhere else.
Right.
So when I see someone doing something really different, I'm just like, oh, I love that.
Okay.
But in terms of like taste profile, I kind of like right now, I lean towards like the spicy wines. So like Morvet is something I really am drawn to. Kevin White Winery does a really, really great one that I love, and his price points are uh, less than you see a lot of other places. So that's, you know, something that really uh, lands on our table quite a bit.
Okay. Just the opposite. Is there a grape that you, for your own palate, you don't care for that might be popular? And that's what I know.
Oh my
What was
God, the
what was
wine
that?
world is gonna hate me for this, but I'm not a big Cabernet Sauvignon fan.
Okay, no. Look, here's the thing. I'm not trying to make this controversial or anything like that. I do think it's like, for example, as I've said many times, I love coffee. Right. I'm not a fan of coffees from Africa. I don't like the flavor profile. It's just not for me. And I
Yeah,
think it's
and
completely okay to say that.
it's not just the flavor profile, it's more that, you know, as I mentioned, we're wine with food people, and it's got more, I think, to do with the way we eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'm not a big meat eater. My husband kind of is, but
Right.
you know, there's that whole steak and Cabernet Sauvignon thing,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, that's just not my jam at
Okay.
all. I'd rather have, um, crab cakes and Chardonnay or
Okay. No, see, no, it's just, and here's the thing that I do realize about wine is that there is probably something for everybody
Mhm.
if you take the time to try it. What I find wine to be intimidating for a couple of reasons. Number one, it can have a bit of a elitist attitude about it.
Oh,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. It doesn't have to, but it can have. And then the problem is if I can't pronounce it, I'm really going to be uncomfortable to order it.
Yeah,
And
I
so
know.
when you're throwing out all these grape varieties, and I'm like, yeah, that might be interesting. I don't know that I'm going to be able to say it correctly. So I'm probably going to say, can I have a Budweiser? And so I think in that, that's just me. That's my personal, but if somebody were to say, hey, try this, and I'd be like, oh, what is this? And you give me some grape variety that is only grown with dung and cow horns on an eastern facing slope at a certain, I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. This is tasty. I like this. And then I'm open to it. So as a marketer for wineries, how do you try to help them position their product for the market that they're trying to get to?
I know. It's different for each one, but I work with one winery called the Amstel Cellars,
Mm-hmm.
and she's really great about just meeting people where they're at. So we just do a lot of stuff where we play off of what's popular at the moment. She's also got a great line of wine she calls it's a tribute to mythology, basically.
Okay.
So she does a Syrah that's fermented in these a giant concrete tank, and so she riffed off of that and calls the wine Medusa because concrete, get it?
Yeah. But
Medusa turns people to stone when,
I get it, but I'm struggling with, I think you're just going to move me off the cow horn thing with this one. Um, Fermenting in concrete?
Yeah, it's a big trend right now in winemaking. It's kind of funny. In fact, one winemaker told me, he's like, because I have a lot of challenges, convincing people that marketing is really essential. And he goes, winemakers are so weird. They'll spend like, $150,000 on a tank, a concrete tank they have shipped from France, and they won't spend $50 on marketing. And it's true.
Okay, so we're just going to stop, and you have to. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot because you brought up the concrete tank. First off, my brain, I think of concrete, and I think of it as being kind of porous, and I think of the wine kind of leach. What is it leaching? I mean, leach is not the right word, but what characteristics does concrete impart on wine?
Well, a lot of them are shaped like eggs. They're called
Okay,
nomblotz.
okay,
And they say that the shape of that encourages the wine to move around inside the vessel in such a way that it keeps stirring the lees. So the lees are, the dead particles
okay.
that kind of fall off in the winemaking process. And that adds richness and texture to the wine.
How big are
And
these?
hmm,
How big are these vessels?
there, I've seen huge ones. And then there's some like smaller clay amphora as well. So I mean, some of them you have to climb up on a ladder to get to the top of.
So you said earlier you said that they're being imported from France. Um,
Mhm.
is
There
that
are
what?
some made here in the States, from what I understand, but they're lined with plastic, so winemakers don't like that.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
this is okay. Hmm.
And the
I
amphora, those are kind of something that go back to like when wine was originally being made. So I think people are kind of drawn to that as well because it feels a little historical.
okay. So we're going to go back to the Medusa, and she's named it because it turns people to stone. What else does she do? I mean, currently, what else does she have? What else? What other naming convention is she using?
So there are the Fates and the
Hmm.
Furies.
Okay.
Yeah. And, like I say, she meets people where they're at. So, like, one of her big things, she started partnering with a local cheesemonger, Rachel Lucas, who I love. And so Mary has at Damsel Cellars has cheese cases in each of her two tasting rooms, and Rachel procures these great artisan cheeses because, like, a lot of the cheese tastings you do when you get to wineries, it's just like, stuff out of a little plastic container. And it's, there you are drinking this wine that someone spent so much time crafting. And then here's like kind of a mass produced product that's being served with it. And it just doesn't make sense. So
Right.
Rachel brings the two together. And, I think when you have wine and cheese together, people just really love that. And, you know, that's another way to meet consumers where they're at.
Where are her two tasting rooms at?
So she's got one in Artisan Hill in Woodinville. And then this weekend, actually, she just opened her second one in the Hollywood district of Woodinville, which is right near where Purple Wine Bar is.
Okay. I mean, you can't go wrong with cheese. So,
Oh man, it is the best cheese. We had some truffle cheese there, and you can buy like wedges to take home, which is what, of course, I always end up doing.
okay. Who else is doing some interesting things right now? What other, let me rephrase that. What other trends are you seeing in winemaking in Washington State? Are there any trends that you're finding kind of interesting that's going on right now?
In winemaking or in the tasting
Let's
rooms?
go both. Actually, let's go both. Let's start with wine. Let's start with winemaking. What are you noticing? Because my very layman's is Washington has gotten far more sophisticated and nuanced in its wines than it was, say, in the 80s. So what are you seeing right now?
Oh, there's so much. There's a trend towards lower alcohol, which we're also seeing like the younger generation lean into quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a trend towards less new oak. Um, and, for me, that's a great thing because, like, I remember the first time I went wine tasting in Walla Walla, and there were all these big red wines, and they'd all been aged in these new oak barrels. And you really just end up tasting the oak, or at least I do
Okay.
when I experience something like that. And I felt like the inside of my mouth was just like ripped apart. And
Okay. All right.
so now we see more winemakers using these different vessels like, the clay and the stone and neutral barrels that have been used multiple times. And so, you're able to taste more of the grape characteristics rather
Mm-hmm.
than like um, the characteristics you get from new oak, which is like a lot of vanillin, a lot of just those really concentrated
Okay.
flavors.
Well, they're more sharp versus rounded off after the barrel's been used a couple of times or more. And
Yeah, the fruit
okay.
just shines more when you've
Okay.
tasted something out of a neutral barrel.
Are there any, so for example, in the apple industry,
Hmm.
Washington big apple industry, they did a lot of the red delicious apple, I'm sorry, the bane of school children worldwide, because it's just not, honestly, it's a beautiful apple, but I've just never found it to be a very tasty apple personally. And so the Cosmic Crisp apple was developed, and that apple is being, it's replacing red apples in a lot of orchards. So this is the new, a trend. Are you seeing any grapes? Are we replacing grapes with other varieties now, or do you see any grapes uh, trending upward as far as more acres being planted of anything?
Well, there's a lot of challenges with that, of course, because, it takes, once a grapevine is planted,
Mm-hmm.
you don't like just harvest grapes the next year and bottle them. You have
Right.
to go through, several years before you can actually use the grapes to make wine. And so people don't readily rip up vines and replace them like that. And then plus Cabernet Sauvignon, people can charge top dollar for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's still the number one grape in the state, I believe, because of that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because when you're buying them by the ton, that commands a premium versus, you know, something else. Okay. Tasting rooms. What's going on in the tasting room business these days?
Well, one of the legacies from when we had the plague that I think is actually a great thing is that some of the tastings I go to now, they bring out these little carafes. So I get like my 4 or 5 wines all sit down in front of me, and I can taste at my own pace or taste a little bit of this and then revisit it again later,
Mm-hmm.
which I find kind of nice, especially when I'm wine tasting with my husband, because I'm a really slow taster. And so, like,
Mm-hmm.
he'll be speeding along and I'll be, trying to keep up.
Okay.
But if we have these little crafts, we can also share a little bit more. Like, we can get 2 different tasting experiences and share them. And I can go at my own pace. And I think that's just a really great thing. And it's great for the taste room staff too, because then they don't have to monitor everyone in the taste room as closely as maybe they used to have to.
Okay.
And then we're seeing more food experiences. Um, like the wine and cheese thing I just mentioned. And then there's a winery out in Walla Walla called Caprio Cellars. They actually have a full-time chef on staff, and he creates pairings for each wine.
Mm,
And they're doing a phenomenal job. Um, and they don't charge for their tastings, which is really remarkable.
really?
Yeah.
Mm,
It's by appointment, so you have to plan ahead. You can't just stop in.
right.
But but I mean, gosh, for the level of quality, it's just unheard of.
Do you see, as you call it, the plague? Do you see our consumers? Are we coming back now? Are tasting rooms getting busier again? Are they back to levels pre plague?
To some extent, I think a lot of these smaller wineries that I work with, they have pretty loyal customers
Mm-hmm.
who have helped support them through all those tough times. Um, what I'm seeing mostly is like I had kind of hoped that we would learn from that experience that we like to have more space and it's a higher end experience when we do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing, unfortunately, not necessarily at tastings, but at events, wine events, tickets are now being oversold. I think people want to make up for lost time and make as much money as they can off of events, which I think is really disappointing because I think if there was one thing we should have learned from all of that is that it's a nicer experience when you limit the number of people at events. But that's my 2 cents.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm not a big fan of people, says the podcast host.
I
Um,
mean, who wants to elbow
I
people? You're supposed to be at a high-end event, and you have to,
yeah, yeah.
grapple with the
I don't
crowds.
want to jostle people or be jostled. I want to, yeah, enjoy myself at a relaxed endeavor. Okay. So here's some things I'm seeing, and you're probably going to hang up on me when I bring these topics up, but I have a couple. Okay, so I have some questions. You kind of elaborated or alluded to, not elaborated. I'm going to ask you to elaborate. You alluded to lower alcohol wines, and younger
Mhm.
crowds are gravitating towards that. Well, so traditionally, when you see a bottle of wine, or when I see a bottle of wine, has a cork in it. Now I'm starting to see a lot more alternate capping methods, a lot of screw tops at a lot of price points, not just the $2 chuck at the bottom shelf at your gas station, and or synthetic corks. Where do you stand with those? Are you a traditionalist and you want to see the wine in a corked bottle, or just what's your opinion?
Well, as someone who has painstakingly put wines away for years and opened them up only to find that they have been corked. And by corked, I mean they're tainted with something called trichloroanisole, TCA. Um, it just destroys. the wine, and it's heartbreaking. Um, to me, that's not a great consumer experience. So I have no problem with alternative closures. I've also seen glass, which I think is a great option. But and especially like during summertime when we're out on the patio,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to worry about remembering to bring the corkscrew outside. If you've got a screw top, it's easy.
But you like bubbles, so are you using like a sword to cut the top off, like you see in the movies where the
I'm not really into potentially hurting myself. I get scared when I hear like the pop of the
uh,
cork anyway. That every time I'm like,
you're a little you're ducking out. Okay, so from an industry standpoint, one thing I heard was that cork is actually getting harder to source, and that there's a scarcity of cork. So that was part of it. So that's I don't know if this is true, but I heard that scarcity of cork and the price of then cork going up was making it a little more prohibitive for wineries to cork with real cork. The corking problem exists. So you have screw tops. You have I hadn't heard of glass, and then you have these synthetic corks.
uh-huh.
The synthetic cork, how does, in your opinion, how does it hold up? Versus, I mean, can a wine still be corked using? Will it still go bad with the synthetic cork?
Well, there are different wine flaws. So when we're talking about TCA or cork taint being the issue, it can actually, if it's in the winery, it
Mm-hmm.
can carry and attach itself onto other things.
Okay.
So, like, say, if you have a winery that's using some traditional cork and using some alternative closures for maybe their different tiered
Mm-hmm.
of wines, um, it can still happen.
Okay.
And like a friend of mine always talks about this. Like it can even like you've probably had apples that have TCA.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I
It
mean, and
smells a little bit like cardboard and stuff. I mean, it gets on all kinds of stuff.
let's go further down the perceived consumer level. Let's go to the dreaded box. Are boxed wines, as I'm asking just as a container, is there, does a box of wine have a future in the better industry of it, if you will? Can a high-end wine be in a box?
If you want to age wine long term, I wouldn't want it
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
But that said, there's a winery down in California that's been making great headway, and when they released their first box wine, it sold out within like 2 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this would be more for then a wine that is a drinkable now versus something you want to set in your cellar for a few years. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Willridge Winery, they do one that's great. It's in a little bag and they put a carabiner on it so you can hang it like if you're going camping, you can just hang it up
Okay.
and
Okay.
fill your glass from that.
All right.
Um, it's great for traveling, that kind of thing.
Okay. One step below box is a can. I see a lot of canned wines now when you go in the grocery store. There's a lot of cans of wine. As a cider fan, I'm not a big fan of cider in the can because there's something about it just doesn't, it's not quite right. It's very convenient. Don't get me wrong. Cider in a can, outdoors, easy peasy. Love that. Don't prefer my cider from cans, but it's super convenient. What's your thoughts on wine in cans?
To be honest, I haven't had enough to really be able to speak to it.
Okay.
I had one a long time ago and thought, meh,
Yeah. Right.
and
That's fine. Well, see,
haven't revisited it.
I wonder about the acidity in the grapes and what it does when it sits in metal like that. I mean, I know,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's just, okay. But from a convenience standpoint, once again, okay. So,
Yeah, and the weight, of glass, that's always a big point of contention,
right.
it's expensive to ship glass. And then, there was a real problem sourcing glass uh during the pandemic. So,
It was also a problem sourcing cans, though, too. Aluminum cans were very difficult. There was a shortage of cans for a while, too. There was a lot. Yeah. Anyway, there was a lot of shortages of everything during the plague.
exactly.
So, one thing you've mentioned a couple of times is the slow wine book. Let's talk about that. How did you get
Okay.
involved and what's going on with that?
Well, with my little business, so I have a business called Vino Social, and I'm kind of like an offsite marketing department for wineries that can't afford their own full-time marketing department.
Mm-hmm.
And during the shutdown, like a lot of the small wineries I worked with, a lot of my business went away because they had to shut down their tasting rooms and they couldn't sell wine to restaurants and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just kind of have to cobble together a few different things. So I did some virtual tastings and a writer actually who I had invited out to a media event for one of the wineries I worked with pre-COVID. Um, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're trying to expand Washington's coverage in the Slow Wine Guide USA. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yes." And so I got put in touch with the editor, Deborah Parker Wong, and the rest, as they say, is history. So now every year, for the last couple years, this will be my third year writing for the guide. Um, I go out and visit wineries. It's one of the hallmarks of the book. We actually go and visit the sites.
Okay.
I walk the vineyards with the winemakers. I sit down with them and taste their wines. And each winery gets a page dedicated to them. So it has a section on the people, it has a section on the vineyards, and it has a section where there are 3 wines reviewed.
Okay.
So it's kind of a neat little guide, and I've used it myself to plan trips. If I'm like, okay, I want to go to wine country here, let's check out, what's in the area from the guide. Because if they're in the guide, I know they're not using synthetic herbicides or pesticides.
So the wine guide is an offshoot of the Slow Food USA movement, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. And I'd like you to explain that to the listener who's maybe not. I mean, I'm on the Slow Food USA site right now, and in bold it says we don't want fast food, we want slow food.
Mhm.
But beyond that, what is the essence of the slow food and slow wine movement?
They boil it down to good, clean, and fair.
Okay. All right. So Taco Bell is the shining example then of the slow food movement. No, sorry, I kid. I I think it's amazing, and I haven't looked at the wine guide. So your website says you hit 17 winemakers in Washington and Oregon.
Mhm.
Sounds like a tough
And
job.
not everyone makes it to the guide. I mean, it's actually that was a real eye opener for me when I started working with the guide and reaching out to wineries and saying, "Hey, I noticed on your website you say you do all these sustainable things. I'd love to talk to you about that."
Mm-hmm.
And I either get crickets, which to me is very telling.
Okay. Okay.
Makes me think the worst, like, okay, they're not even not doing sustainable stuff, they're doing stuff they really shouldn't.
Okay.
Uh, or, they get back and they say, "Yeah, we don't qualify." So,
Okay.
uh, yeah.
How how long did it take you to visit the 17 wineries? How long are you when you go there and you're walking the vineyard and you're talking to the team and you're sampling the products? How long are you at a winery on an average?
Well, out of respect for their time,
Mm-hmm.
we try to keep it brief. But actually, when I sit down with some of these folks, some people want to taste me through like their whole lineup and
Right.
spend a lot of time with me. So anywhere from like 20 to 30 minutes at the minimum
Okay.
to hours.
Okay. That's fine. You've also done a little bit of writing for our website. You did something on Pioneer
Yeah.
Square. Um, and I haven't been in Pioneer Square in a number of years, so I was surprised that there was as many opportunities there as there are. That was kind of a pleasant surprise. Also, West Seattle. I don't think of West Seattle as a booming wine center for some reason. Once again,
Yeah, actually, and the wineries out there, uh, Pine Lake Cellars, when I visited them this summer, was the first time I got to see their spot because I kind of didn't want to go to West Seattle when the bridge was closed.
I don't know. I don't know why.
But they have got the greatest setup. They've got, and again, I think this is one of those great benefits to come from COVID. They set up all these little tasting nooks outside with all these different fireplaces and such, so you can taste outside there year round, which I think is a great Northwest experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been wine tasting outside, then you really haven't been doing the Northwest right.
You're absolutely correct. So, questions I love to ask my guests. So I'm gonna ask my traditional question. I've got a variation follow up immediately for you. I love coffee. So where's a great place in your area of the world that I should go and try coffee?
We're fans of Uptown Espresso
Okay.
here in our little neighborhood.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of options in our neighborhood, but I like them because, it's the home of the velvet foam.
Okay.
I like a cappuccino with nice foam on
Okay.
it.
So then the variation of that question for you is, where's a place to go and have a glass of wine in your area? Where's a fun little place to just go and, you know, sit down, have a glass of wine, chat with a friend?
Oh gosh, just one?
You can no, I asked for one, but we'll let you cheat. Give me a couple of suggestions, and
Because actually,
I'm gonna give you a little bit more parameter. That for the wine novice, I might have made that
huh,
harder for you. I don't know.
that does make it harder for
Okay,
me.
then go, take it. I don't want to make it hard. So give me a cup. Give
But
me a
a
cup.
lot of the tasting rooms, you can go and order a glass of wine
Right.
instead of a tasting
Mm-hmm.
too. So, there's always that option.
Right. But in your area of the world, where's a couple of places? Drop some
Gosh,
names.
sadly, some places closed during, um, gosh. For us, it's always like a foray to the tasting rooms.
Okay.
But there is a great place in Madison Valley called Sorrel,
Okay.
and he's dedicated that place to Washington wine. He
Oh.
kind of calls it his love letter to Washington wines, and his food is amazing. And he meant to start out as a wine bar,
Okay.
and he still has like part of the place as a wine bar, but he also does great tasting menus and pizza night, pop-up pizza nights, and
Okay.
fun stuff like that. But that's usually where we go if we're gonna want to go out and
Okay.
about.
Okay. All right. Going to ask you to build an itinerary for me. I'm going to spend a weekend in Walla Walla. Where should give me some? No, I don't want to say where, but because there's with over 100 wineries, you're going to leave a bunch off. We know that. But are there some in Walla Walla that you think are kind of like they do something really cool or really well? Like it's a great experience.
Oh, there's so many. I always go see Devison Vintners because they have a real soft spot in my heart. I used to work with the winemaker Peter Devison,
Mm-hmm.
and he and his wife Kelsey, this is their venture. And Peter's, I worked with him for like 5 years, and I just have so much respect for for what he does. He takes such great care in his winemaking. And when you go and taste with them, you taste with them. Like they don't have staff. You
Oh,
taste with, yeah.
see, that's a cool angle. I mean, you see, that's the type of stuff that I find that doesn't scale. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. Okay. So that's a
Yeah.
great
Very,
suggestion.
very cool.
Give me another one. Doesn't have to be like quite like that,
So
but you know,
yeah, Caprio Cellars,
mhm.
they're the ones who do that food experience. I mean,
Right.
just bar none, that's just fantastic.
Okay.
Uh, Grow Grain is one I'm a big fan of. Again, like the lighter alcohol wines. Sparkles, they do a Petnat Lemberger that's
Oh,
really cool.
wait, please repeat that.
A Petnat Lemberger. So it's a sparkling wine made in the old school method
Okay.
where it just goes through like a fermentation in the bottle, uh, and it hasn't been disgorged, so usually still see some little sediment floating around in there. They get the fruit from Kiona Vineyards, which is one of the stalwarts of Red Mountain,
Okay.
but the best regions in our state, and it's fun.
Okay. All
He
right.
does a skin contact Semillon, which is a white wine, which when you get extended skin contact, it kind of makes it a little bit more like a red wine style. So it's got a little more heft to it, which
Okay.
it reminds me of wines I tasted when I was traveling in Slovenia. So it kind of brings back a little travel memory for me. He's just doing really cool stuff.
Okay. Not a Washington State question, but you said Slovenia. So where else in the world have you traveled and enjoyed wine?
Oh gosh. I had a great instructor at the Wine Academy who led trips. And so I took advantage of that and did a number of trips. So um, throughout France, I've been to, Bordeaux, Bourgogne, Champagne, Provence, Alsace. Uh, we've also been to Italy, Slovenia, Austria, Germany. Um, Gosh, just a lot of different places.
Okay.
As I'm Portugal is on one of my wish lists,
Okay.
bucket list, I guess.
All right.
It just looks so beautiful.
People that I know that are currently living there enjoy it a great deal. It's they said it's better than you would hope. So there you go. That's a big endorsement there. All
That
right.
is a great endorsement.
So I always ask a food related question, and we've touched on food a lot here, but we're in your area of the world. Where's a great place to grab lunch?
We're kind of weird. We usually don't go out for lunch, but we love pastries and stuff.
Okay. All right.
We've got a great little French bakery down in our neighborhood called Petite Pierre.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so like all kind of croissant and that kind of stuff. So we love that place. And then during the season when the farmers market's running,
Mm.
I love hitting up the food trucks at the farmers markets.
Yeah. That's kind of hard to go wrong with those, isn't it? It's just, yeah. All right. My last official question, and to full credit, I stole this question from another podcast. So if they're listening, I'm giving them credit. It's a very important question. Cake or pie,
Cake.
and why?
Oh man, I'm not like a pie crust person.
Okay. That's fine. There's no wrong answer here. It's always interesting to listen to people. You're like the fastest response. Everyone's like, and then they're justifying or rationalizing. Well, if I could get this, it's like, no, it's just cake or pie, and why? It's like there's no wrong answer here. Okay, so cake. What type of cake?
Oh goodness. Maybe like a flourless chocolate cake.
Okay. Okay.
Either that or like an apple cake.
Interesting. All right. Okay. All right. Finally, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?
Oh my goodness. This is like a job interview question, Scott.
Well, I want to make sure. I want to make sure that you're qualified. No, I want to make sure that we got to something. If there was something we unintentionally left off, I want to make. This is the opportunity to make sure that we cover it.
Oh my goodness. Well, maybe where I might be visiting in wine country next.
Okay, where? Yeah, what's the near future holding for you?
So I'm gonna start planning my travels pretty soon for upcoming edition of the Slow Wine Guide. And on the way, I want to stop and visit in Ellensburg. Upside Down Wines has a tasting room there. And I don't think a lot of people yet know that Ellensburg is starting to have a wine presence there. And I just love what Seth and his wife are doing there. He's they've got, their own vineyard and they've been farming it sustainably and everything. And that's really important to them and his whole philosophy. And he's always trying to just push himself to just keep learning. Like that's the great thing about all these winemakers that I get to experience. They're, they have one shot a year. Like a chef every night, they can whip up something different and they have a lot of chances to like get their stuff in front of people. But these winemakers, they have one shot every year to work with the fruit they want to work with.
Mm.
And
Mm.
to be able to see someone like Seth, he's a little bit younger, but he grew up, his parents were farmers and his parents had winery. And he just keeps pushing himself to keep learning and do something different every year.
Where is their tasting room in Ellensburg? Is it downtown?
I think so.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I'm surprised that Ellensburg has a wine scene developing. I'm not surprised that it's developing. I just didn't know anything about it. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So you're going to go to
I hope
Ellensburg.
it's Ellensburg. I hope I didn't get that wrong.
Now we're going to fact check in real time, folks. Upside Down Wines. Let's so where else are you going to go? Let's why I'm fact checking you. Where
Oh, I still actually have more Seattle wineries to visit. So there's about a little over 20 wineries that are part of the Seattle Urban Wineries.
Okay.
And last year I visited a fair amount, but because I was on the road so much, didn't get to quite all of them. So up in Ravenna, there's Eight Bells Winery, who I've been dying to get to go visit. They're kind of off a little alleyway in a very unexpected part of town.
Mm-hmm.
So they're high up on the list for sure.
All right. So I was going to tease you, but you kind of pulled it out. It's not Ellensburg.
Ah,
It's well, they're in Hood River, Oregon,
well,
and
yeah, they've
and
been there for a
Cleellum
while.
and Cleellum.
Lee Ellum. Ah, dang it.
That's okay. That's okay. If you go to Cleellum and you're there, there's
Yeah.
a place called the 509 Bakery that's quite delicious. I recommend you take a look at that. There's
Oh, I love my bakeries.
a restaurant called Orchard, which is quite amazing. There is a teriyaki place that I cannot think of the name of it, and I'm not doing it justice, but it's a Seattle chef who opened a really interesting restaurant right in downtown Cleon.
Oh,
And
are you sure that's still open? Because I think I read that shuttered, or he severed his ties with it or
he may have
something.
severed his ties. It was open. We ate there a month ago. So, but what I found interesting was that there was wrapped around this place was a chicken joint where they're serving like
Yes.
fried chicken too. It was a very strange combination. The food was quite good. So that chef, okay, so all right, interesting. But Orchard's kind of across the street from that place, and that's definitely an interesting little place to check out in Cleo. And then Owen's Meats. Have you ever been to Owen's Meats?
No,
So it's a great butcher shop, but they have a vending machine out front where they sell meat out of a vending machine, and I just find that amusing.
that is amusing.
Yeah,
Is it
and
like cured meat
yeah, now
or?
it's cured meats, but when they started this thing, they actually were selling like T-bone steaks. There were refrigerated vending machines, and you could go and buy a T-bone, and
But
now
should you? I
well,
mean,
it's refrigerated. It's a refrigerated vending machine. I'm just thinking this though. Have okay, you were in HR, so you were in a corporate environment, right?
oh yeah.
Was where you worked, did you have vending machines in employee break areas? Was we've
Hmm,
all seen the
we
scenes where like people
must
are
have.
pounding on the machine because the chips are hanging there, right? And there's 75
Yeah.
cent back. Well, would you imagine how upset you'd be if your $25, top sirloin was hanging there and didn't come out of the machine correctly? I mean, that was always what
Get
I
your
thought was,
hand stuck
yeah,
trying
pretty
to,
much. I always thought that was funny. But anyway, no, Cleam's a great little, Cleam and Ellsberg are both great little towns. I think this is fascinating that you're doing this. Where can people find you online? They want to find out more about what you're doing and the wineries that you're talking about. Where can they find you online?
I have my own website, vinosocial.wine, and I've got a blog up there. And then I'm also on social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at vinosocialnancy.
Okay. Which social platform do you prefer? I love asking this question because we all like are you an Instagram or are you a Twitter person more?
I started out on Twitter, kind of kicking and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to do it at first, but back at the time, there were a lot of virtual tastings happening in real time. So, like wineries would send wines to people across the country, and then we would all convene on Twitter at the same time and share our comments and thoughts about the wine, which at the time was,
140 characters or less. I'm describing this glass of wine I'm having. Okay.
But I've met a lot of people in real life from having first met them on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd long been more of a Twitter person. Now it's getting kind of, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Um Instagram's a lot more work though.
Okay. All right.
If I'm honest.
Well, I personally find them all to be just exhausting. That there's great stuff on there, but it's just the toll that it takes to get to the great stuff sometimes is just more exhausting for me than the payoff at the end. That being said, I probably spend I spend more time on LinkedIn.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's kind of.
I think I need to lean into that a little bit more. And then like Pinterest, that's just like a time suck, It's like you go looking for something and then all of a sudden you're like, it's like squirrel.
Right, exactly. So thank you for taking the time to sit with me today.
Thank you, Scott.
I think what you're doing is really great. I think I'm with you. It's not just wineries, but they're small businesses, and I'm throwing them all under the bus at the same time, but small businesses in general have a hard time realizing that a great product and no promotion means no sale or low sales, that they need to lean into getting the word out there about what they're doing and doing it in a way that's authentic versus just who can scream the loudest. So I think what you're doing to help small wineries is great. And I think it's wonderful that you were able to find a path out of corporate that's rewarding for you. I think that's very cool.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. I'm glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.